The ranchers of Pine Valley were getting tired of Caleb Morrison's excuses. Every fence he started remained half-built. Every job he took ended in disappointment. But what they saw as incompetence was actually genius. Caleb was using his construction contracts as cover to dig tunnels that connected safe houses throughout the territory, and his unfinished fences marked the secret entrances to freedom routes that had saved dozens of lives. But to understand how a simple fence builder became the most wanted man in Colorado territory, we need to go back to where it all started. Back to a summer morning in 1872, when young Caleb first learned that some barriers are meant to be broken, and some construction projects are more valuable when they're never finished. Caleb Morrison had arrived in Pine Valley, Colorado territory, in the summer of 1872 as a 28-year-old former Union Army engineer, carrying with him specialized knowledge of excavation and tunnel construction that he had learned during his service in the siege operations of the Civil War. He was tall and powerfully built, 6 feet 2 inches, with the broad shoulders and calloused hands of a man who had spent years doing physical labor. But his most valuable assets were his engineering skills and his unshakable commitment to using those skills to help people who had nowhere else to turn. Pine Valley in 1872 was a rapidly growing ranching community that had attracted settlers from across the United States who were seeking to establish cattle operations on the vast grasslands of eastern Colorado territory. The valley's location along major cattle trails made it a natural stopping point for trail drives heading north from Texas to the railroad terminals in Kansas and Colorado, creating a thriving economy based on the buying, selling, and transportation of livestock. But the prosperity of Pine Valley had also attracted criminal elements who saw the isolated ranching community as perfect territory for illegal activities that could be conducted far from the oversight of territorial authorities. The valley had become a haven for rustlers, claim jumpers, bounty hunters, and various other criminals who preyed on honest ranchers and legitimate businessmen who were trying to build productive lives on the frontier. Most dangerous of all were the organized manhunting operations that had established themselves in Pine Valley to capture and return various categories of people who were fleeing from different forms of persecution and exploitation. These operations included former Confederate soldiers who had turned to professional bounty hunting, corrupt territorial officials who profited from the capture and return of fugitives, and criminal organizations that specialized in kidnapping people for sale into various forms of involuntary servitude. Caleb's true mission in Pine Valley had nothing to do with fence building. He was actually an operative working for a secret network of former Union Army personnel who had dedicated their post-war lives to continuing the fight against slavery and oppression in whatever forms they encountered on the frontier. The network included engineers, intelligence specialists, combat veterans, and logistics experts who used their military skills to protect people who were being hunted by bounty hunters, corrupt officials, and criminal organizations. The specific assignment that had brought Caleb to Pine Valley was the construction of an underground transportation network that could move fugitives safely through the territory without detection by the manhunting operations that controlled the surface roads and trails. The project required engineering expertise that few people possessed, as well as the ability to work undetected over long periods while maintaining a convincing civilian cover identity. Caleb's cover as a fence builder was perfect for his real mission because it gave him legitimate reasons to work on properties throughout Pine Valley while conducting the excavation activities necessary for tunnel construction. His fence building contract provided him with access to land, tools, materials, and workers, while his reputation as an unreliable contractor explained why his projects took so long to complete and why he spent more time digging than building above-ground structures. The fence-building jobs that Caleb took on were carefully selected based on their strategic value for the underground network he was constructing. Properties that were located along major travel routes, near existing safe houses, or in positions that provided good concealment for tunnel entrances became his highest priority projects. Ranchers who were sympathetic to fugitives or who could be trusted to keep secrets were preferred customers, while properties owned by people who might be hostile to his real activities were avoided entirely. The excavation techniques that Caleb used were sophisticated adaptations of military engineering methods he had learned during the Civil War. His tunnels were constructed with proper ventilation systems, drainage channels, and structural supports that would allow them to remain stable and functional for years. Most importantly, he designed the tunnel system with multiple routes, emergency exits, and hidden access points that would allow fugitives to travel safely even if part of the network was discovered or compromised. But Caleb's greatest innovation was his integration of the tunnel system with his fence-building activities in ways that made the underground network virtually invisible to casual observation. His half-finished fence posts served as ventilation shafts, his abandoned construction materials concealed tunnel entrances, and his incomplete fence lines marked the underground routes that connected different parts of the network. The safe house connections that Caleb created through his tunnels were the heart of his protective operation. Each tunnel connected multiple properties where fugitives could find shelter, food, medical care, and assistance with continued travel to destinations where they would be safe from pursuit. The underground routes allowed people to move between safe houses without being seen by bounty hunters, corrupt officials, or criminal organizations that might be watching the surface roads. Caleb's system was designed to handle different types of fugitives who needed different kinds of assistance. Former slaves who were fleeing bounty hunters required rapid transportation to free territories where they could establish new lives. Political dissidents who were being persecuted by corrupt territorial officials needed secure hiding places where they could remain safe until the political situation changed. Witnesses to serious crimes who were being threatened by criminal organizations required protection until they could testify safely in court. The construction of each tunnel segment required weeks or months of careful work that had to be conducted without attracting attention from neighbors, customers, or potential enemies who might be conducting surveillance. Caleb developed elaborate techniques for concealing his excavation activities within the context of his fence-building work, creating explanations for the noise, dirt displacement, and unusual activity patterns that were necessary parts of tunnel construction. His methods for managing excavated soil were particularly ingenious. Rather than creating suspicious piles of dirt that would indicate underground construction, Caleb integrated soil removal with his fence-building activities by using excavated material for fence post foundations, property landscaping, and road improvements that appear to be normal parts of his construction work. The result was that his tunnels could be excavated without leaving any obvious evidence of underground activity. Caleb's first major success came in the spring of 1874 when his tunnel system was used to rescue a family of former slaves who were being pursued by a professional manhunting operation that had tracked them from Texas to Colorado territory. The family had been hiding in a safe house on the outskirts of Pine Valley when bounty hunters surrounded the property and demanded that the residents surrender the fugitives. Instead of being trapped by the manhunters, the family was able to escape through Caleb's underground network, traveling through tunnels that connected the surrounded safe house to other properties where they could continue their journey to safety. The rescue operation was completed in less than 4 hours, with the fugitives emerging from the tunnel system at a location several miles away from where the bounty hunters were conducting their search. The success of this rescue operation established Caleb's reputation within the network of people who were working to protect fugitives throughout Colorado territory. Word spread through the Underground Railroad community that Pine Valley had become a safe transit point where people could find protection and assistance even when they were being actively pursued by professional manhunters. But the growing success of Caleb's operations also attracted unwanted attention from the criminal organizations whose activities he was disrupting. Professional bounty hunters began to notice that fugitives who entered Pine Valley had a mysterious tendency to disappear without trace, suggesting that someone in the community was providing systematic assistance to people who were trying to evade capture. The investigation that followed was conducted by experienced manhunters who understood that the rescue operations they were observing required sophisticated planning, specialized knowledge, and access to resources that suggested organized opposition rather than random assistance from sympathetic individuals. They began conducting systematic surveillance of Pine Valley, looking for patterns and activities that might reveal the identity and methods of whoever was helping their targets escape. Caleb's challenge was to continue his tunnel construction and fugitive assistance activities while avoiding detection by investigators who were specifically looking for signs of organized underground railroad operations. This required him to develop even more sophisticated techniques for concealing his real activities while maintaining his cover as an incompetent fence builder whose projects never seemed to get completed. The solution that Caleb developed was to create multiple layers of deception that would mislead investigators even if they suspected his involvement in fugitive assistance activities. He began deliberately sabotaging his own fence-building work in ways that would make him appear genuinely incompetent rather than suspicious. He cultivated relationships with customers who would complain loudly about his poor workmanship and unreliability, creating a public reputation that would divert attention from his real activities. Most importantly, Caleb began using his fence-building failures as cover for creating false tunnel entrances and decoy excavations that would mislead investigators about the true scope and capabilities of his underground network. If manhunters discovered evidence of tunnel construction on his properties, they would find systems that appeared to be incomplete, poorly designed, or abandoned rather than the sophisticated transportation network he was actually operating. These deception operations were successful in confusing the manhunting organizations that were investigating Pine Valley's underground railroad activities, but they also created new problems for Caleb's legitimate fence-building business. His reputation for incompetence and unreliability became so well established that it became increasingly difficult to obtain new contracts that would provide cover for continued tunnel construction. The crisis that nearly ended Caleb's mission came when several prominent ranchers in Pine Valley decided to take collective action to address what they perceived as his fraudulent business practices. Led by a group of property owners who had paid deposits for fence work that had never been completed, they organized a formal complaint to territorial authorities that would result in an official investigation of Caleb's activities. Caleb's response to this threat demonstrated both his engineering skills and his commitment to protecting the people who depended on his underground network. Rather than fleeing or abandoning his mission, he chose to accelerate his tunnel construction activities while preparing for the possibility that his cover identity would be blown and he would be forced to operate through alternative methods. The accelerated construction project that Caleb undertook during the final months of his cover identity was the most ambitious engineering feat of his career. Working with a team of trusted assistants who had been recruited from the network of people he had previously helped, he completed tunnel connections between all major safe houses in Pine Valley and extended the underground network to connect with similar systems in neighboring communities. The completed tunnel system represented over 4 years of construction work and included more than 30 miles of underground passages that connected over 50 different properties throughout the region. The network included multiple emergency exits, communication systems, supply caches, and medical facilities that would allow it to continue operating even if surface-level support was eliminated or compromised. But perhaps most importantly, Caleb's final construction project included comprehensive training programs for the people who would continue operating the underground network after his departure. He taught local residents the engineering knowledge necessary to maintain and expand the tunnel system, the security procedures required to prevent detection by hostile investigators, and the coordination techniques needed to manage complex fugitive assistance operations. The official investigation of Caleb's fence-building business began in the fall of 1876, when territorial authorities arrived in Pine Valley to examine customer complaints about his allegedly fraudulent practices. The investigators expected to find evidence of simple business incompetence or financial fraud, but instead they discovered the most sophisticated underground railroad network in Colorado Territory history. The revelation of Caleb's true activities created a political sensation that extended far beyond Pine Valley and led to fundamental changes in territorial law enforcement approaches to fugitive assistance operations. Federal authorities realized that the underground railroad networks operating throughout the West were far more sophisticated and extensive than they had previously understood, and they began developing new strategies for working with rather than against the people who were operating these protective systems. The tunnel network that Caleb had constructed continued to operate for over a decade after his departure from Pine Valley, helping hundreds of additional fugitives reach safety and establish new lives in free territories. The system he had designed proved to be so secure and well-engineered that it was never successfully penetrated by manhunting operations, despite numerous attempts by professional bounty hunters and corrupt territorial officials. More importantly, the techniques that Caleb had developed for concealing large-scale construction projects within the context of civilian business activities became models for similar operations throughout the American West. His methods for integrating tunnel construction with surface-level activities were studied and adapted by other engineers who were working on underground railroad projects in different territories. The Safe House network that Caleb's tunnels had connected became the foundation for a comprehensive fugitive assistance system that provided not just transportation, but also medical care, legal assistance, job placement, and family reunification services for people who were trying to escape from various forms of persecution and exploitation. The system evolved into a permanent institution that continued serving vulnerable populations long after the specific historical circumstances that had created the need for underground railroads had changed. But perhaps the most significant aspect of Caleb's legacy was not the tunnels he had built or the fugitives he had saved, but the demonstration that individual dedication and technical expertise could create protective infrastructure that would serve entire communities for generations. His half-finished fences had become permanent symbols of the principle that some construction projects are more valuable when they appear to be failures, and some barriers are more effective when they seem to be incomplete. The ranchers who had once complained about Caleb's unfinished fence work eventually came to understand that his apparent incompetence had actually been extraordinary competence applied to a mission that transcended conventional business relationships. His abandoned fence posts had been markers for a network of freedom routes that had saved lives and protected families throughout Colorado Territory. In the end, Caleb Morrison had indeed been a fence builder, but the barriers he had constructed were not the wooden structures that his customers had expected. Instead, he had built barriers against injustice, oppression, and exploitation, barriers that were hidden underground but were strong enough to protect generations of people who needed safe passage from persecution to freedom. The fence builder who never completed a single job had actually completed the most important construction project of his era, a network of hope that proved that with enough dedication, technical skill, and moral courage, individual citizens could create infrastructure that would serve the cause of human freedom long after the builders themselves had moved on to other missions and other territories. If you enjoyed this incredible true story of engineering triumphing over oppression, subscribe to our channel for more amazing tales of ordinary people who accomplished extraordinary things in the American frontier. In the comments below, let us know what you think about Caleb's methods. Was he right to use deception and underground construction to help fugitives escape, or should he have worked within the legal system? Click on the video appearing on your screen now to discover another shocking story of hidden heroism from the untamed West.